Good morning, CLC. I invite you now to just take in a nice, deep, cleansing breath, breathing in all the love and light that surrounds you. And as you release the breath, release any stress or tension you may be holding in your body. Any doubts or worries that you have, just let go of them for now. And if you feel so inclined, go ahead and take another nice, deep, cleansing breath in. And as you release this breath, allow your body to just relax in this moment. And allow your mind to be here now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems, while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room with me this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in this room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude and saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
Danielle's going to tell you about a class that's starting tomorrow night when we come to the announcement time, but if you're watching this on YouTube, you won't get the announcements that the Facebook people get, and you in the room are you in the room. So let me mention that tomorrow night begins a 10-week class called The Essential Ernest Holmes. He was the founder of this teaching, and I put together a book of what I consider to be his essential material about 22 years ago, and then developed a class out of it. And if you're interested, it'll be on Zoom, 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time for 10 consecutive weeks beginning tomorrow night. Love to have you. More detail on this, just ask me afterward, and I'll tell you where to go to sign up, get more information. And we have the book across the way here. Or you can order it by drone, delivered to your doorstep. By drone, they'll get it to you. Scarily enough, the next 12 hours or so. This is a series this month on work, on money, on commerce, from a spiritual standpoint. In October, to throw everybody a complete curveball, we're going to have a series on mysticism. They're not mutually exclusive, but this is practical information for you to use on a daily basis. So today we're going to consider the idea of something called spiritual macroeconomics. I made that up, I think. I may trademark it. I don't know. But spiritual macroeconomics. There was a book called Spiritual Economics you may be familiar with, by Eric Butterworth. That's why it rings a distant bell. Yeah, and in New Thought, in the New Thought canon, it's a classic. I want to develop his ideas and just the general thought of this a little further into the idea of the macroeconomics of things, which looks like this. First of all, and I see some people here. I've met some people already this morning I didn't know who haven't been here before. And maybe you're familiar with this kind of teaching and maybe you're not. And so I got to assume you're not. And, it becomes a newcomers meeting, as they say. So our contention in this teaching is that the universe is one whole system. And one name for that system is God. If that's not a name you enjoy using, there are plenty of others. But when we say God here, we mean the universe as one whole system. And when we say the universe as one whole system or one whole intelligence or one whole purposefulness, we mean God. The two terms, the two expressions are interchangeable. So if I go for a while, or any of us teaching this goes for a while without saying the word God, and you're wondering, well, where's God in all this? Okay, it's that universe is a whole system. You get the idea? And I've had this happen. People come and say, well, you never talk about God anymore. Well, yeah, I am. I'm just, referring to it in a different way. And then sometimes I talk about God, and people are like, that word hurts my ears because I've been abused in its name. So, well, then think of it as a whole system. So if we're going to think of the thing as a whole system, as a unitary wholeness, or as some classical ancients called it, the monad, okay? The one whole thing that is everything, that is not only everything in form, but is everything in potential, which pretty much covers the waterfront, wouldn't you say? Everything in form and everything in potential. If this is what we're talking about, and this is the kind of universe that we choose to think we live in, then we have to rewrite some rules for ourselves about how we do business on a daily basis. We can no longer pretend to be entirely separate from one another. We can no longer pretend to be entirely in competition with one another if the universe is one whole system. So a way of looking at that might be this. The spiritual dimension of everything exists at the level of the spiritual, and it exists at the level of the material. Right? So down here on earth, wearing bodies, getting up, going to work, having families, doing all the things that we do, we tend to trip off into that reality and think it has a whole separate operating system from that of spirit as the spiritual. This causes us any number of problems, believing this separation. For one thing, we get scared. When we get scared, we tend to get angry. We tend to get resentful and regretful. We tend to get in our own way. We tend to isolate, wall up, and hurt, and even make ourselves sick. It's not a positive set of outcomes that follow from the sense of separation. So what we're learning to do is to realize that we live in a spiritual dimension that has, for the time being, materialized. I'm here now. You're here now. Yes, we're wearing bodies and eating food and doing all the things that we do here, but that's not the whole of us. That's not the utter existence of us, any more than the work that we do is the whole story. And that's an example, the work that we do and how we hold the work that we do, it's an example of the separation that we've been taught to live in, because we tend to go around. I tell you one of the things, what you won't notice a lot of in places like Creative Life is that we go up to you and say, so what do you do? Right? I mean, it may eventually come up, and you may eventually volunteer it, but I got to be honest with you, there are people who have been coming to this place for 30, 35 years. I haven't a clue what they do by way of work, because it's just never come up. And we find plenty of other things to talk about. It's not that we're allergic to work at all. It's just that, because we're a hard-working group of people. But it just means we don't put each other in these categories, in these little boxes based on, well, how much education you must have and how much money you must make and your place in the status rungs. No, all of that it's immaterial. It's literally immaterial. It has no footing, no basis. So a fun thing you can do the next time somebody comes up to you and says, so what do you do? Is say, when? Sometimes I work, sometimes I sing in the shower, sometimes I mow the lawn. What point are you asking about? Then if they specify, well, what is it that you principally do by means of, to gain an income, well, then you can have a conversation about that if you want. It's not the fullness of what we do, the work that we do. But it's also kind of, you'll pardon the expression, it's the stepchild of spirituality, because it's a part of what we do that has been considered the most tawdry and the least honorable of all of our engagements. If you have kids, oh, that's a beautiful thing, you should be a parent. And if you're a musician or an artist or a poet or this, that's a wonderful thing. But work, and especially money, I quoted for you last week Emerson, who we had a series on the last couple of months before this one, where he said that money, which is hardly spoken of in parlors without an apology, is in its effects and laws as beautiful as roses. In other words, there's a principle at work there by which things are generated in life. To activate that principle more fully in your life, a place to start is to feel like the universe is one whole system, and it's happening right now, right where you are. The point I made in the talk last week was that whatever you're doing right now, whatever anyone is doing right now, is valuable. That's another dodge we sometimes get into, is when I finish school, then I'll start my career, and then I'll contribute something valuable to the planet. What you're doing right now is valuable. If you're between jobs, it's valuable. If you're retired, it's valuable. You're creating something. You're creating literally a body of work that's affecting other people in healthy, wholesome ways. People are watching you. They're seeing how you live your life, and they're taking inspiration from you. Yeah, I can do that. If you're dealing with adversity, people are watching you, and it's helping them to overcome adversity, or it's helping them to become more compassionate. If they're not going through adversity right now, they notice you, and their hearts open in compassion to people suffering elsewhere, which brings me to this. If the universe is, as we suppose, one whole system, then there's really no you or me in it. And Reverend Lisa spoke beautifully about this. I still remember, I think it was 3 years ago, right at the start of the pandemic, when you gave it. Do you remember this? You're scowling at me, but you gave a talk called "There Is No Them." There is no them. Right? I'm not my brother's keeper. I'm my brother. We are each other. There is literally one life. I am a vantage point in it. You are a vantage point in it. But there's one life. When you're using spiritual law, let me tell you, I get excited about this, okay? When Jesus and others, great spiritual teachers down through the ages, have said, forgive everybody, forgive your enemy, and bless those who persecute you. And he actually gets accused sometimes of being a bit of a weakling. I don't know if you've seen this lately. Forgive people? No, you have to beat them down. No, not the Jesus I love, not the one I believe in, Well, what he was teaching us was not masochism. He was teaching us unity. He was teaching us the fact that we're all one. To get really clinical about it, the subconscious mind, which is the place of creative law within the self, does not distinguish between the self and other. This is why, if I'm all bound up in resentment and regret, nothing works out for me. Because the subconscious mind takes that message and it says, trouble, we can do that. Limitation, sure, you bet. Nope, we got some right here. It doesn't, you mean him. You mean those people. No, it's all one. It's all one. We shoot ourselves in the foot repeatedly when we separate the other out, when we blame, hold others in blame. In fact, when we don't even go the extra mile. It's not about just not blaming others. It's because it's not about ignoring others. It's about going the extra mile and actively blessing and hoping and wishing for the greatest possible good for everybody, including the people you don't like, the people you don't understand, including the people who may have hurt you along the way, individually or generically. Wishing for them the highest possible good is one of the greatest acts of self-healing. And this, my friends, we are not customarily taught. We're taught to get what we need. We're taught to look out for ourselves, to produce for ourselves. But we're all one. We're not even just connected, like lumped together in some. We are one. We are in one life. And so when you begin to recognize that, and it took me a long time. I was introduced to this idea a long time before it really settled into me, and I began to see it, and I began to trust it, and I began to view it as a habit of mind. And so if this is coming at you like, whoa, that's a big ask, well, do a little more of it each day, perhaps, than you have been doing. This thinking of the macro side of human experience. A place to start with that, if you are looking for a place to start with that, is to realize that right now as we are here in this room, there are all sorts of people swirling around us, doing things for us that we don't want to do, or don't know how to do, or just flat physically cannot do. There are people driving up and down that road. There are people flying overhead. There are people preparing the meal that you're going to eat in some way or another 2 weeks from now. There are people making the clothes that you're going to wear 2 years from now. There are people working, there are plumbers and electricians and all sorts of technical people doing things out in the world. There are people doing jobs you've never heard of, possibly in places you've never heard of, and thriving at that, and they're doing this for you. Do they know it's you specifically? No. But they're doing it for you. You're going to benefit from that. When you realize that, it's like, hey, I'm taken care of. I'm never alone. And, of course, you can reverse the whole equation as well. And there are things that you're doing right now for somebody else. There are things that you're doing in this room to prepare yourself for what you're going to do when you hit the floor tomorrow for somebody else. And in this way, we all serve each other. And it starts to look like heaven. Now, there's an image here. You may have heard this. You never know when you throw these things into talks. Everybody groans, oh, God, not that again. I've heard this, but you may have heard this 10,000 times, or it may be new. Somebody goes to, they go to hell for like a tour. I don't remember the setup to all this, okay? And there's a long table. And all these people sitting there with this beautiful meal in front of them, and they have eating implements that are like 2 feet long, and so they can't can't stab the food, and it's too long to get it in their mouth, and so they're wasting away, and they're starving, and they're miserable, and they're crying, and the same person then is taken on a tour of heaven, and there is the same table with the same sumptuous array of food and the same long implements, and everybody's feeding each other. You hadn't heard that. I love that. Okay, great. Yeah. Everybody's feeding each other. Somebody had to go first, didn't they? Somebody had to think of that. Like, I wonder sometimes about who was the first human to eat a lobster. They must have been very hungry. Yeah, we can do something with this. So somebody had to go first. It had to dawn on somebody. And they had to put the other first. I said, let me offer this to you, It's just that subtle turn of thought that makes all the difference in the world. When it comes to money and commerce and transactions and stuff, typically there are two forms of this vis-a-vis remuneration. There are goods and there are services. So some people are busy creating goods, and other people probably it has turned where it used to be when we were a predominantly agricultural society. Mostly it was goods and a little bit of services. Now I think it's a little bit of goods and more services. Because they didn't have consultants in the Middle Ages, you know, that kind of thing. So you're creating something, and then you're managing it. You might think of this as in a restaurant. There's a chef. The chef is creating goods. The chef is producing a meal. Then there's a waiter. The waiter is carrying the meal out. Both are necessary. The waiter requires the chef or the waiter to have nothing to serve. The chef requires the waiter. The chef would have to keep, stop cooking to run stuff out to the tables. Wherever we are in this equation, now we look at the restaurant model and we say, well, chefs are more important. You call them chef, in fact, means chief, and you pay them handsomely, and waiters kind of are seasonal and they're working their way through school and all that. Well, that's just a prejudice that we have. We say, well, this person, they're doing a more vital task. No, everybody's involved in some way in dispensing of the goods. And here's the thing, is that the chef isn't always a chef and the waiter isn't always a waiter. Because the waiter acts at the local theater, and the chef likes to drive stock cars on the weekend, or everybody's involved in multiple things. And we look for where is our good coming from in all of this. One of the questions people ask themselves when they have big artistic creative ideas is, how am I going to monetize this? Who's going to pay me for this? Who's going to buy this from me? To relieve ourselves of that pressure requires the recognition of one source. There is one spiritual source that is constantly feeding us, constantly providing for us, if we will agree that it is. If we will agree that it is. If you shake it off and you say, I don't know, that seems too simple, the whole thing seems to shut down. Then it becomes more complicated. You know why? Not because it is more complicated, but because we're powerful enough that we've called it to be more complicated. But when we say there's one life and one source and it's providing for me, we meet it halfway. As one writer put it, we take a step toward it, it takes a step toward us. Actually, it comes running toward us because it is nature. It is our nature that we've resisted perhaps up to this time, but now we no longer do. So we invite life to take care of us and do things for us. And if we start to feel guilty, like maybe I should take more action, you know what we do then? We take more action. We take more action. We say, I get off the couch, and I meet it halfway down the block. My good. I go there and I do this thing, which reminds me of this great story I read. I think it was just last night. Could have even been this morning. One of you mentioned when I told a story the other week, came up to me and you said, we read the same news sources. Okay? So you may have heard this, but it's really cool. A guy in Norway, stop me if you've heard this one, lived up north of Stavanger on a little island. His doctor came to him, or he went in for a checkup, and the doctor said, you're kind of sedentary these days. You need to get out and get some exercise and all, take walks along the beach. And so the guy thought, I need a hobby that will prompt me to do that. So he bought a metal detector. And he went out and he's out there on the beach and he finds all kinds of stuff. Junk. Aluminum things and just junk. And he catalogs it all. And every now and then there's a little money, little coinage. And he gets this idea, there's this hill next to the beach. Let me go try the hill with the metal. Is that what that sounds like a Geiger counter. I don't know what metal detectors, it whirred or sputtered or did something. He goes to this hill anyway, and the thing goes nuts, and he starts digging, and he thinks it looked like Hanukkah gelt. It looked like coins, chocolate coins wrapped in gold. It wasn't. It was Viking gold. It was Viking gold. Viking gold coins strung together into sets of amulets that he cleaned off. And they're calling it the greatest gold discovery of the 21st century. It is so historically important. It fills a gap in the understanding of the people of that region at the decline of the Roman Empire and the rise of the Viking culture. And, oh yeah, this guy's going to be really, really wealthy. And so is the landowner, because under Norwegian law, if you find stuff, which makes sense, if you find stuff on somebody else's property, they get half of the value of it. So he's going to get the value per the government of these coins he found, plus 10%, and then divide that with the landowner. So who loses in this proposition? Who does not win in this proposition? I can't find anybody who doesn't win. Science wins. History wins. Anthropology, right, wins. Sociology wins. The Norwegian guy who got off his sofa to go out with the metal detector wins. The landowner who's oblivious to all of this wins. And we just won because we heard the story. And so we thought to ourselves, I thought to myself, which is redundant because who else do you think to? But I thought to myself when I read this story, the next time I have a hunch to do something, one more indication to follow it and see where it leads. So if we will but trust, there's one life, there's one source, just one source, and I'll close with this idea. Because there's the material aspect of spirituality and the spiritual, all-encompassing aspect of spirituality, we must take care of each other in order to exemplify and extend the spiritual. There are people on this planet, everybody has a direct connection to their spiritual source, and there are people on this planet who are suffering in systems of thought that seem to separate them from this. Our job is to make life easier for each other, to make it easier for each other. So if you want to buy a home, you should be able to. Yeah, it's going to cost money, but you shouldn't be turned away because of the color of your skin, you know? If you want to have a job in a certain place, yeah, it's going to take an education and it's going to take training. And you shouldn't be turned away because of who you love and how you love. All these rules of separation, many of them, frankly, traceable back to organized religion. If not instituted by organized religion, highly defended by organized religion as a way of doing business, are bogus. There is one life, there is one life. And when you thrive, I thrive. That's why sometimes people look at us as creative life. Well, that's one of those progressive spiritual communities, you know, bordering on the communistic or something. Read the literature. Read the literature. Read the words in red in the Testament, in the Christian Testament. Read the words in red and find me in there where it says, oh, there's an exclusion to the kingdom of heaven. Somebody's left out. No, all are welcome, all embracing. And the more that we feel that, the more we take back ownership of the disparate parts of the self that we may have estranged ourselves from. The less we judge others, the less we judge ourselves, the less we judge ourselves, the less we judge others. It's a yin-yang kind of thing, and it can't help but help. It can't help but help to live in love. That's what unconditional love is. So more on this next week. 2 more weeks to go on work, commerce, trade, so forth. Got some kind of out there stuff for you the next couple of weeks, and then we'll get into mysticism. And if you want to read ahead on the mysticism series, read Evelyn Underhill, a book called Practical Mysticism, also another book of hers called The Golden Sequence. She was a phenomenal 20th century mystical writer, Evelyn Underhill. All right, let's know together now. One life, one power, one presence. We call it God. We call it good. We call it God the good. Emma Hopkins said, "My good is my God, and my God is my good," and that's good enough for us to know that there is this one operating in and through us, manifesting always, and now it is unleashed in our lives. As we consciously cooperate with it, by blessing and sanctifying and uplifting everyone and everything upon whom our gaze falls, knowing that each person now knows that they are at choice. That is the greatest blessing we can give, that right there. To know that each one of our companions in this life knows that they are at choice, that they are direct, free agents with an open, unmediated relationship with the source of their own being. Because we know that when we have known this, life has gotten better, the skies have gotten brighter. So we can only reasonably assume that as everybody discovers this about themselves, their life improves, therefore all life improves. Furthermore, it is the truth. It is the truth of their being. And we say this without any manipulation or coercion or needing people to agree with us or like us or join our group, or without any social agenda whatsoever. Everyone now knows who they are and whose they are. And for this knowing and its manifestation in form everywhere I turn, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
So thank you for being here for the first time. And for everyone who has been here before, thank you for returning and being here again. Thank you for your presence, your love, your energy, and your support. We know you have multiple choices on Sundays, and so we are very grateful that you chose to spend this time with us. And we also want to thank you for any monetary gifts that you give to us. It is because of what you provide to us that we can be here for you. So thank you so much for everything, no matter how big or how small you give, because we know it comes from your heart to our hearts, and that's what makes us one. I invite you all now to say with me, divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
And now I get to do, a lot of the times I just get to welcome you into the week. And every now and again I have a request for you. Well, today I have a request for you. There was a earthquake on either Thursday or Friday, I'm not sure, in Morocco, in Marrakesh. So, and Jesse always looks at me when he says anthropology, because that's what my undergraduate degree is in. And when I looked it up just to see what, because it was a bad one, and a number of historic sites were definitely damaged, which just hurts the anthropologist heart in me. So, along with the loss of life and just the general chaos that comes behind a natural disaster like that. But we know what to do. We go straight to spirit, and we hold all of those people in love. And then we donate to organizations that we know are going to reach them. So I know World Kitchen is one that's a really good one, because they go all over the world and set up and feed people. And I'm sure by the end of the day, somebody will have a link up somewhere in our social media for if you want to do any of that. But right now, what we are going to do is go to Spirit. So join me by consciously entering into the sacred. It's all sacred all the time. I'm inviting you to consciously enter in and know that there is one life, one power, one presence, one love. And each and every one of us, we live that life. We are channels for that love. We are the material manifestation of that presence. And that power flows through us. And so as we open our minds and our hearts and our arms to the people of Marrakesh, the people of Morocco, we know that they are safe. We know that resources are already springing up from all directions, from the infinite variety of places that Spirit can pull from. We know that they have drinking water and that they are getting the resources they need to make connections with their families. And we hold them in love, and we hold them in peace. And we know that in the end, it will be okay. What they go through, because we're there with them. And I know this with all of the love that I have within me, which comes from an infinite source. And I'm grateful for a place that teaches me who I am. I am grateful for a place that teaches me the power that I have. I'm grateful for this community where we come together to learn with each other who we are. I'm grateful for our ministers. I am grateful for our musicians. I am grateful for our practitioners. I am grateful for each and every one of you for the brilliant, loving lights that you are in this world. And I'm grateful for the technology that allows us to broadcast this, even to Marrakesh. And so I relax and I release my word into law with love, knowing that it is done, even as I speak these words. And so it is.
Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Wonderful is happening through.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose
I
it.
trust it.
I trust
I
it.
use it.
I use
And
it.
I love it.
And I
And
love
so it is.
it. And so it is.
Sorry, Jesse. You can tell I've been gone for a bit. Falling down on the job.